She dropped the pretzel. Right there in the middle of the mall, just outside the Build-A-Bear workshop. I hadn't planned on being there that day. I hate malls. The smell of cinnamon sugar and broken dreams. The forced cheer in every store greeter's voice. But I needed a new belt, and the outlet store had a Labor Day sale. And then, I saw her. Maribel. 2 years. No contact. No texts. No, I'm sorry. Just gone. And suddenly, there she was. Holding a child. His child. I stood still. She stood stiller. If there was a world happening around us, I didn't hear it. All I heard was the little girl tugging at her sleeve and asking, "Mommy, why did that man make your face look like that?" I didn't plan to say anything. I didn't plan to do anything. But my mouth moved on its own. "Nice to see you again," I said. "Does he know?" She blinked. Once. Twice. Looked down. Her lips quivered like she'd forgotten how to use them. That was enough for me. I walked away. But before I did, I turned back and whispered, "Tell Brennan I said congrats. You look exhausted." Then I left. But you know what's messed up? That wasn't even the worst part of this story. You want the whole thing? The cheating. The pregnancy. The lies. The way she weaponized my kindness like it was a weakness? Fine. You'll get it. But you need to understand something. I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always the kind of man who knew how to vanish. But the day she left, something inside me broke, and I didn't fix it. I buried it, and I let it rot. After the mall encounter, I couldn't sleep for 3 nights. I kept hearing the little girl's voice in my head, over and over. "Mommy, who's that man?" She had no idea I was the reason her mother drives with both hands clenched on the steering wheel now. She didn't know that the guy standing there used to carry her mom's lunch in a brown paper bag to the clinic because she forgot again. She didn't know that her mom used to cry when watching TV commercials about happy couples because we're not like that anymore, Lowell. I didn't even know her name. And I guess that's the part that ripped something open. Maribel had built an entirely new life, one that grew, thrived, and solidified while I was still sleeping on the same side of the bed, alone, out of muscle memory. So let's rewind a bit. 2.5 years ago, 1 week before she told me she was pregnant with someone else's child, we were sitting on the back porch, mid-March, the kind of cold that feels personal. I made us tea. She didn't touch hers. I was wearing that stupid fleece jacket she always hated, and she was scrolling through her phone like I wasn't even there. Then she said it. Without blinking, without looking up. "You're too safe." I laughed at first, like an idiot. I thought she meant it as a compliment. You know, I thought she meant stable, loyal, dependable. But then she followed it with, "I know you'd never cheat on me, or hit me, or scream at me in front of my friends." And I think that's the problem. Imagine hearing that from the woman you gave 6 years of your life to. I said, "You're mad that I don't abuse you?" She shook her head and finally looked at me with this expression, a mix of pity and exhaustion, like I was a dying pet she couldn't afford to put down. "No, Lowell," she said quietly. "I'm mad that I don't feel anything anymore when I'm around you." That night, I Googled how to spice up a marriage while she was in the shower texting a man named Brennan. I didn't know it yet, of course, but I felt it in my stomach. The shift. The way she didn't wrap herself in a towel anymore when walking out of the bathroom. The way she stopped asking me to heat up her side of the bed. I started feeling like a guest in my own house. No, not even a guest. A tenant. And I was paying rent in the currency of emotional restraint, swallowing every question I wanted to ask just to keep the silence from exploding. And then, one morning, it all snapped. She came into the kitchen wearing a scarf I'd never seen before, freshly blow-dried hair, and lip gloss, at 7:30 a.m. I asked, "Got a meeting today?" And without even facing me, she said, "You wouldn't know about ambition, Lowell." That was the moment. Not the toothbrush. Not the pregnancy. It was that sentence, tiny, venomous, that finally told me I'd been erased. She had already left me. She just hadn't packed yet. I would have never found out if it wasn't for her car battery dying. We were still pretending to be fine at that point, going through the motions, sharing a roof, splitting groceries, sleeping back-to-back like strangers who used to have secrets. That particular Thursday morning, she came storming into the house at 8:15 a.m., hair in a panic, jacket half-zipped, holding her car keys like they personally betrayed her. "The car's dead," she muttered, dropping her bag by the door. I had just sat down with my coffee and a plate of dry toast. She didn't even look at me. Normally, I'd offer to fix it right away. Jump cables, drive her to work, whatever she needed. But something about the way she said it, like I owed her salvation, made me pause. I didn't even reply at first. I just sipped my coffee and waited for her to ask, like a grown-up. She didn't. 10 minutes later, she left in an Uber without a word. That was her new thing. These deliberate silences she used like weapons. Her absences weren't just physical. She found a way to make her presence vanish, even while standing 3 feet away from me. But fate's a funny thing. Around noon, I went out to check the car. I popped the hood, found the issue right away, loose battery cable. 5-minute fix. But when I got in the driver's seat to test the ignition, something happened. Her phone connected to the car's Bluetooth automatically, and it started playing a voicemail. I didn't even know her car still had that feature turned on. Hey, so, I keep thinking about your neck. Is that creepy? Probably. I just miss your laugh. That crooked little smile you do when you're lying about being okay. The voice was male. Soft. Familiar. I froze. You don't have to say it. I know he still doesn't know. But you don't owe him more time, Maribel. You gave him enough years already. And I'm not going to keep playing pretend, not when you're mine. You're mine now, okay? I just sat there. Not breathing. Not blinking. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even rage. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because something in me just snapped. You know that moment when grief becomes absurd? When betrayal gets so obvious it becomes theater. That was me, sitting in my wife's car, listening to Brennan talk about her neck like it was his favorite place to live. I got out, slammed the door, walked back into the house like a zombie. She came home later than usual. Smelled like hotel soap. Had a receipt for Thai food in her purse, and I hate Thai food. She dumped it in the trash like it meant nothing, then smiled like nothing had ever happened between us. I wanted to ask her about the voicemail. I wanted to say, tell me about Brennan. Tell me what he does that I don't. Tell me how long you've been giving away my future like a clearance sale. But I didn't. Instead, I said, I fixed the car. She barely looked up from her phone. And that's when I realized she wasn't hiding the affair anymore. She was just waiting for me to be the one to leave. She wanted clean hands. She wanted to cry to her friends that she tried, that I was distant, that I gave up. But I wasn't going to give her that luxury. I was going to stay. And I was going to let her drown in her own lies until she begged me to go. There's something unexplainably powerful about staying calm when someone expects you to break. After hearing that voicemail, I could have confronted her. I could have screamed, cried, flipped the dinner table, or gone full tragic husband mode. That's what people like her expect. Chaos, so they can call it mutual destruction and walk away feeling justified. But I didn't give her the satisfaction, not even a whisper. Instead, I started living like a man who had no one to impress, especially not her. That very weekend, I pulled all my tools from the shed, cleared out the garage, and built myself a quiet workspace. She asked if I was going through a phase, and I smiled. I told her I was starting a new project. She rolled her eyes and went back to texting someone with a stupid grin on her face. I stopped asking her where she was going. Stopped checking in. Stopped caring what time she came home. She once stumbled in after midnight, heels in hand, hair knotted, and perfume I didn't recognize. I was in bed, reading a book I never had time for before. She paused like she wanted me to say something, anything. Instead, I marked my page, said, hey, and went back to reading. She didn't know what to do with that. This wasn't forgiveness. This was surgical detachment. I wanted her to feel the silence she weaponized, but sharper, more precise. Like a scalpel, not a baseball bat. And little by little, the house started to shift. Not physically, psychologically. It became mine again, not in ownership, but in atmosphere. I put music on in the mornings, started cooking meals just for myself, replaced the scented candles she liked with ones I liked, even if they made her cough. I took long walks in the evenings and let the silence follow me like a loyal dog. Then came the journal. Maribel always kept one, leather-bound, hidden under her side of the bed, tucked between socks and sleeping pills. I'd never touched it, not in 6 years. But one night, while she was at a wellness retreat with a coworker, spoiler, it was Brennan, I found myself staring at that drawer like it was whispering my name. I opened it, and I read every page. I don't know what I expected. Regret? Confusion? Some hint of inner torment that could explain why she threw me away like expired milk? No, what I found was worse. She wrote about him like he was a lighthouse and I was a fog. She described their first kiss, which apparently happened months before she ever told me she was unhappy. She wrote about our last anniversary and how performing for me made her feel like a con artist. There was even a list, a literal bulleted list, titled, "Why Brennan Makes Me Feel More Human." Number 7 on that list. He looks at me like I'm fire. Lowell looks at me like I'm furniture. That one sat in my chest like a cement block. I didn't cry. Not even then. I just put the journal back exactly where I found it, closed the drawer gently, walked into the bathroom, and vomited until my ribs ached. I realized I'd been mourning a version of her that never really existed. And that's when I decided to stop trying to fix anything. I wasn't going to rescue this marriage. I wasn't going to be the better man. I was done being the doormat in a relationship I built from the ground up while she was busy shopping for an upgrade. But I wasn't going to blow it up either. I wanted her to implode it herself, with no one left to blame but the reflection in the mirror. They don't prepare you for what it feels like to live with someone who's slowly replacing you while you're still there. It's a strange sort of haunting, being a ghost before you're even dead. The thing is, I wasn't going to make her feel better by vanishing. That's what she wanted. She wanted me to walk out, slam the door, and give her a clean story to tell her friends. Lowell gave up. He couldn't handle it. I tried. She needed that scapegoat, and I refused to give it to her. Instead, I started living like she didn't exist. I stopped setting a plate for her at dinner. I started doing my laundry separately. I moved my toothbrush to the downstairs bathroom. I canceled Netflix and got a reading subscription. She asked once, "Why did the Hulu login stop working?" I didn't answer, just shrugged and said, "Didn't notice." I watched her scroll through her phone for half an hour that night, bored out of her mind while I sat in the next room reading a 600-page novel in total peace. I didn't do any of this out of pettiness. I did it out of necessity. I needed to stop orbiting her, emotionally, mentally, physically, and rebuild the gravitational center around myself. It was survival, plain and simple, but it was driving her insane. You could feel the tension shift. She went from smug and distant to unsettled and twitchy. She started poking at me, little jabs. "You've been really quiet lately. You're dressing differently. Are you seeing someone?" I'd just smile politely and say, "I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking." The more I stopped reacting, the more she started unraveling. Suddenly, she wanted to check in after dinner, or talk about our future, or go on a little getaway to reset. I wanted to ask if Brennan's Airbnb wasn't available, but I didn't. I just nodded like I was listening, all the while noting how her confidence had started to decay around the edges. And then something strange happened. She called me babe. It was a random Wednesday night. We were in the kitchen. I was cleaning a cast iron skillet. She was grabbing a glass of water. She bumped into me slightly and said, "Sorry, babe," like it was second nature. I froze, not because I believed it, but because she'd spent 6 months calling me Lowell like she was addressing a customer service agent. I looked at her, and she avoided my eyes. Her lip twitched like she regretted letting that word slip out. And I realized something. She was afraid. Afraid I was moving on. Afraid she wasn't the one in control anymore. And that's when I started planning something very specific. No screaming. No revenge affair. No public meltdown. Just a quiet, private event that would show her, once and for all, who she left behind. I started working on it at night in the garage. I cleaned it out, put up drywall, sealed every draft. She asked what I was building. I said, "Closure." She laughed, but not the way she used to. It was short, nervous, hollow. She didn't know I meant it. She had no idea that I was preparing a goodbye so clean, so final, it would feel like a disappearing act. But not yet, because the show wasn't over. Not until she saw me rise from the ruins she created without her. There's something about laughter that unsettles guilty people, especially when they don't know the reason behind it. It happened on a Sunday. Rain outside, nothing on the calendar. I was in the garage, my sanctuary by now, listening to an old podcast about surviving psychological warfare in hostile workplaces. It wasn't relevant to my job, but every word felt weirdly familiar. I started laughing. One of those genuine, belly-shaking laughs that you don't fake. The kind that sneaks up on you when you've spent months pretending everything is okay. I didn't know Maribel was in the kitchen. She must have heard it through the wall, because 10 minutes later, she knocked on the door and asked if I wanted lunch, something she hadn't done in months. "No thanks," I replied, still smiling. "I'm full." I wasn't, but she didn't need to know that. The next few days, her behavior shifted again. this time in small, desperate ways. She started wearing makeup to sit on the couch. She offered to wash my car. She actually made my coffee one morning and left it on the table with a sticky note that said, "Thought you might like this, smiley face." The smiley face felt like a hostage letter. This wasn't remorse. It was damage control. She wasn't mourning me. She was mourning the version of me that used to chase her validation like a starving man begging for crumbs. But that man was gone now. I'd buried him quietly while she was busy writing love letters to Brennan in her journal. And speaking of Brennan, she stopped mentioning his name entirely. I don't know if they fought, if he ghosted her, or if she realized he wasn't built for anything other than emotional escapism. But his presence vanished. No more mysterious trips, no more suspicious perfume, no more giddy 11 p.m. text replies. That's when I knew something had gone wrong in her fantasy. But I didn't ask. I didn't even blink. I carried on like I hadn't noticed the quiet implosion taking place 3 rooms away. I just kept building in the garage. I didn't tell her what it was, of course, and she never pushed. But she started hovering near the door more often, pretending to do laundry in the hallway, asking what tools I needed, trying to insert herself into a process she no longer had permission to enter. I gave her short answers, polite ones. I became the perfect roommate, clean, neutral, unbothered. And that drove her insane. She once said, back when we still talked like people, that her worst fear was being ignored. Not hated, not yelled at, ignored. She said silence made her feel like she was vanishing. So I gave her that, not to be cruel, not to win, but because silence was all I had left to give. And in that silence, I watched her unravel. She started leaving cabinets open, slamming drawers, turning lights off while I was still in the room. Petty things, childish, even, but they were cracks, fractures in her performance. And every one of them made me feel more certain that I had finally, truly taken the upper hand. Not through power, but through peace. And that's what the project in the garage really was. Peace. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a weapon. It was my exit strategy. A blueprint for emotional escape, built from nails, screws, and months of quietly swallowing heartbreak until it turned into resolve. Because soon, she wouldn't have to guess what I was doing in that garage. She'd see it. And she'd realize too late that I had already left her, long before I ever walked out the door. The day she opened the garage was the day the story really ended, even if the goodbye hadn't been spoken yet. She wasn't supposed to see it until I was gone. I had it all planned. I was going to leave the garage door open just enough for her to notice it after I'd disappeared for good. That was the whole point, a wordless finale. A quiet, "you did this," carved into wood and steel. But like everything else with Maribel, she couldn't let me control the timing. Not even at the end. It was early on a Saturday. I had just stepped out to get coffee. I left the garage unlocked, not thinking she'd even bother. She hadn't shown real interest in anything I did for months, maybe years. But when I came back, I saw her standing inside it, barefoot, arms crossed, staring at the thing I'd spent the last 8 weeks building with my own 2 hands. It wasn't a sculpture. It wasn't some elaborate revenge contraption. It was a tiny home, a fully livable, meticulously finished, standalone escape pod, built inside our garage. It had a bed, a desk, a reading lamp, a small heater, shelves lined with books, a built-in cabinet with foldable clothes, a journal, and a note taped to the wall. You don't have to burn the bridge. Just walk off it and keep going. She was reading the note when I stepped in. She didn't turn around. After a few seconds, she spoke, voice low, like she was standing at a grave. "You were really gonna leave without saying anything?" I leaned against the frame, coffee still warm in my hand. "I've been leaving you for 6 months, Maribel. You just didn't notice." She turned then, and I saw something in her face I hadn't seen in a long, long time. Not guilt, not anger, not even sadness. Fear. Not the kind that screams or throws plates. The quiet kind. The kind that settles in your chest when you realize you've finally lost the one person who knew how to love you without conditions. She stepped forward, eyes wide. "Is this where you've been going every night?" I nodded. "You built this to what? Punish me?" I laughed, not cruelly, just tired. "No. I built this so I wouldn't need anything from you ever again. Not closure. Not forgiveness. Not explanations." She looked around again, slower this time. Like the walls were closing in. "So what? You just move into this thing? Park it somewhere and pretend none of this happened?" "No, Maribel. I said, finally stepping fully inside. I remember all of it. I just don't carry it anymore. She looked like she was going to say something, but stopped. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked at the bed, the lamp, the note, and then at me, and for a split second, I saw it. Regret. Real, choking, stomach-dropping regret. And she couldn't take it. She stormed out without another word. But I heard her crying before the door even closed behind her. I didn't chase her. I didn't follow. I didn't even flinch. Because I wasn't the man who needed her anymore. I was the man who finally built something just for himself and walked into it, not to escape, but to begin. And that, right there, was the moment I knew she had already lost me. Not because I left, but because she finally realized I had nothing left to take. 2 years passed like seasons you didn't see coming until the leaves changed. There was no single day when I got over her. No magical moment where I stood up and declared myself healed. That's not how heartbreak works. It's slower, quieter, more honest. I sold the house 5 months after the garage project, moved the tiny home upstate, parked it on a small lot near a lake, took a new job, part-time, peaceful, surrounded by people who didn't know anything about the version of me that used to beg for love like it was a limited resource. I didn't date right away, didn't post vague quotes on social media. I just lived, learned how to cook better, started reading again, grew herbs in a wooden box I built myself, wrote letters to my younger self and never mailed them. I stopped waiting for closure and started giving myself peace in pieces. And then came that afternoon at the mall. I was visiting my brother in the city. We took his kid to the indoor play park. I just picked up a smoothie and was turning the corner by the escalator when I saw her. Maribel. Her hair was longer. She wore oversized sunglasses and a hoodie that didn't look like her style. But I recognized her walk, her posture, the way she scanned the crowd like she was always waiting to be noticed. She was holding the hand of a little girl, maybe 3, maybe 4. Brown curls, Brennan's chin, and then she looked up. Her mouth actually dropped open. She stopped mid-step. The pretzel in her other hand slipped right out of the paper and landed on the floor. Her daughter tugged her sleeve and asked, "Mommy, who's that man?" And Maribel just froze, like the world had stopped turning. I didn't break stride, didn't smirk, didn't pause, didn't acknowledge her beyond a single glance. Not out of coldness, but because I had nothing left to prove. I was wearing a fitted jacket, holding a smoothie with my name spelled right, skin a little tanner, posture a little taller. Not the ghost she buried in suburbia, just a man who walked away and never needed to look back. As I passed, I saw it in her face. Regret, not just for what she did, but for what she lost the moment she bet against me. That was the moment she understood. I had become everything she didn't think I was capable of being, but not because of her. In spite of her. And that little girl? I hope she never hears the story. I hope she never feels the collateral damage. I hope she gets to grow up without inheriting the guilt of someone else's choices. Because the truth is, I'm not angry anymore. I'm not broken. I'm just done. And somehow, that's the happiest ending I could have asked for.